All right, welcome everyone to the next installment of NPAN Live. Today it's going to be the Humane Handling live question and answer round with the Humane Handling Institute at University of Wisconsin River Falls. So joining us today are Dr. Kurt Vogel and Ashlynn Kirk, two NPAN collaborators. We've worked together extensively in some of our programming, and they have a super exciting, just really like totally innovative program happening at University of Wisconsin River Falls, where they're doing the near impossible task of stunning, training humane handling and stunning in a controlled environment, so that people can build some confidence and some skill without being terrified of an inspector being looking at them over their shoulder. And I know a lot of us have been there before. So just before we get started, I'd love to share just a little bit about NPAN. If you're new around here and wonder who we are, we're an extension-based community. We're like half extension, half trade group. We help small meat processors and brands thrive through a growing community of shared information, innovation, and educational resources. So basically what we do is we've got a website that is very deep when it comes to technical tools. We've got a ton of case studies. We've got a very deep webinar library. We've got business plans. We've got just so many resources to get you started or move you along on your path of being an independent meat processor or brand. We provide technical assistance. So if you go to our website, nichemeatprocessing.org, and at the very top, there's a link that says technical assistance. There's about 15 people there that you can schedule free calls with right now. So it's consulting with industry experts. Each person's name has their specialty below it, and you can call and talk to them for free. So there's no strings attached. We just onboarded 3 new people. 2 of them are HACCP experts and food safety experts. The third person is an expert in sales, marketing, and bringing new products to market. So we highly encourage you to take advantage of that because it's there. We also give grant advice, and right now, as many people know, the MPEP round 2 grants are up, and if you're thinking about going for it, you've got about a month left before they're due. If you're in the process and you need a hand, if you need a review by a grant writer, or you need someone to help you with your staffing chart or your pro forma, or maybe writing your narrative, we have people who can help review or advise or move you through that. And then we've got our peer-to-peer network. So we've got a newsletter that comes out once a month that has a lot of the happenings, around the industry. But the thing that is really special is we've got a Google group called the NPAN Listserv, and it is a group of about 2,500 people in the industry, a very heavily moderated industry group. So it's not like Backyard Butchers on Facebook or something. It's a place where you can come and get real answers from real industry professionals. It's a super helpful group, and people have a lot of trust for each other there and ask some pretty deep questions. So we encourage you to join that. Last but not least, we've got a Facebook group called the Small Meat Processor Support Group. Again, heavily moderated industry group. It is extremely focused on what's actually happening in plants, boots on the ground action. So we highly encourage you to join. And who makes up NPAN? So our community, it's made up of very small to mid-sized meat processors, generally plants between 5 employees and 100 employees. Retail butcher shops, independent consumer packaged good brands. So you might have some aggregators in NPAN who are having their products co-packed. Livestock producers, industry reps, and then academia, regulatory, and extension agents. And you can kind of see the breakdown of who belongs to our group there. So without further ado, just a couple of things before we jump in. We really encourage questions. This is a live Q&A. This is a place where you can come and talk about your challenges on the harvest floor or the kill floor, in the plant, training your employees, things that have gone sideways on the floor. We can talk about that here in this space. There's nothing to worry about, and we encourage you to ask away anything that comes to mind. So if you don't mind, Feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see that down at the bottom of your screen, and we will kind of answer them as we're able to. And then if you also want to use the raised hand function, feel free. That's all the way to the right where it says reactions. If you click on that, you'll see a raise hand button, and you can raise your hand and we will call on you as soon as there's a natural break. So again, this will be recorded, and today I'd like to welcome Dr. Kurt Vogel and Ashlynn Kirk from the University of Wisconsin River Falls Humane Handling Institute. I love working with these guys, and Dr. Kurt, you may have seen him in the Western Meat School or the Meat Processor Academy. He's been around quite a bit, and what he and Ashlynn are doing out there. I've spoke to a couple people who have gone through the Humane Handling Institute, a couple of small workshops through there, and they've confirmed what I suspected, is that it's there's nothing else out there like it. So welcome, Dr. Kurt, Ashlynn.
Hey, David. Thanks for letting us join you today. So we're really excited to share a bit of our backstory with everybody, and then we can get into some question and answer for the bulk of our time together, if that sounds all right. Before we get too far along, can you hear us okay?
Sounds really good.
Awesome. All right, so we'll go ahead and share our presentation, and we'll walk you through what we've got going on up here. All right, here we go. So again, thank you all for the opportunity to talk a bit about the Humane Handling Institute. The two of us here will trade off as we go through the presentation. So I'll start off by giving a bit of an introduction to the program, and then Ashlynn will jump in and she'll talk more about humane handling program development. So we'll go ahead and get started. So here in the US, just to give you a bit of a scope for how many animals are impacted by our annual slaughter here in the US, we slaughter about 34 million cattle, just under 140 million hogs, and then about 2.7 million sheep and goats every year across all of our USDA inspected establishments. This is a substantial number of animals that we process, and those folks that are involved in this process hold a substantial amount of responsibility to make sure that those animals make that transition from live to dead in a way that they don't have to experience with any substantial suffering. That's kind of our main focus here. Now, since 2014, the Animal Welfare Lab at UW River Falls has summarized the enforcement action letters that are posted to the Food Safety Inspection Service website. And we characterize those letters in a variety of different ways. So we talk about the species that are involved, the types of infractions that are involved, root causes, and so on. And one thing that we've consistently seen since 2014 is that the vast majority of enforcement actions include cattle and pigs. Now, this is not because cattle and pigs are problem species. It's actually because the vast majority of the animals that we slaughter here in the US are in fact those animals. Like if we take a look at, or if you remember the numbers from the previous slide, it was only a very tiny sliver of animals that we slaughter here in the US that were not cattle and pigs. And so we would expect that there'd be a little more concentration of these enforcement actions with those animals. The nice thing that this data did for us is it helped us to realize where we need to focus our attention when it comes to training. If we focus a lot of our attention on cattle and pigs, well, we can probably have a pretty substantial impact on Humane Slaughter Act compliance for most processors. One of the other things that we saw that showed up as a very common trend since we started tracking in 2014 is that stunning year over year over year has been the primary driver behind these enforcement actions. So these are issues like missed stuns and multiple stuns that would cause this, ineffective stuns as well. So when you look at just stunning by itself, it's usually over 80% of enforcement actions that were caused by stunning related issues. Now, in this pie chart that you can see here, we've got the cause of enforcement actions for 2022 listed as 72% for stunning. However, there's also a substantial portion of that 24% that's classified as multiple. that also includes stunning related issues. So what this data helped us to do is focus our attention on what probably matters most when it comes to training our processors in Humane Slaughter Act compliance. And the two take-home messages we got out of this were, one, we got to focus on cattle and pigs, and two, we need to focus on stunning. So we went along tracking this data for, the better part of a decade. And it started to become increasingly clear, especially to me in the consulting work that I was doing aside from my academic appointment, that we needed a training center. So in 2000, actually in early 2022, Governor Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, allocated $5 million to support workforce development training for meat industry personnel in the state of Wisconsin. I pitched the idea of developing what would become the Humane Handling Institute. The initial idea was we should establish a center where we can bring key personnel that are involved with the slaughter process into our facility, our training center, and we can teach them in a very controlled way how to effectively handle and stun livestock without the pressure of having to deal with inspection personnel hanging over the person's shoulder, like David had mentioned just a few moments ago, and also without the pressure of having to stun live animals. And so this initial program layout included a series of 5 workshops. The 5 workshops are listed here, but the 2 that are really most relevant right now with this audience are Workshop 3, the effective and humane restraint and stunning of livestock, and Workshop 5, building a robust humane handling program. These were the 2 workshops that Ashlynn and I set out to build as soon as we got this program off the ground. We started with Workshop 5, building a robust humane handling program. Ashlynn will tell everybody more about that in a little while. The other workshop, effective and humane restraint and stunning, trains people in stunner maintenance, stunner placement, cranial and brain anatomy. We also do live training with handling live animals. And this isn't just like dog and pony show demo type stuff, but we put people with the animals and they move them. We have them change different aspects of the facility that we mock up for them, so they can see how changing the way animals see can have a major impact on how well those animals move. We also will, at one point in the workshop, load up our handling facility with distractions. That part's always kind of fun, you know, we get to like throw our morning coffee cup in the chute, you know, hang our coat over the side of the chute, stuff like that, you know, and then we have our people first try to move animals through that, realize the animals won't move well, and then encourage them to pick it apart. So the thing I think that makes our training unique here is that we try at every possible opportunity to put the action in the hands of the people that are attending. So instead of watching us do it, they do it, and then we coach. And we help to sort of guide the conversation so that they develop the skills that they need. So we've had very positive feedback from these workshops so far. A couple of our early attendees decided that they enjoyed what they were doing so much that they wanted to provide some testimonials. And so here's one for the group: that by starting with a core group of people and training them in small groups, the Humane Handling Institute was able to send us back with all the materials needed to further educate personnel and the confidence to implement a robust systematic handling plan. This came from Mike Rossi. He's the quality assurance manager at Crescent Meats in Cadott, Wisconsin. And Mike was one of the early attendees of our developing a systematic approach to animal welfare, a robust humane handling program workshop. Another testimonial came from Brandon Clare, the owner of J.M. Watkins Meats in Plum City, Wisconsin. And he said that you provided an environment that allowed us to be comfortable discussing actual events that had happened in our plant without casting judgment on us. Your experiences and background brought real-world experiences to the class that were relevant to our own plants. I would highly recommend anyone that harvests animals to attend this course. Also on this slide, you can see a picture from our pilot of our humane handling and restraint workshop. And an important thing to note with this, as you can see here, is that the folks that are doing the work in the plants are the people that are out in the pens moving the animals around. So they get a lot of hands-on experience. One other testimonial that I'd like to share with this that came after this latest workshop came from the quality assurance manager at the plant that had joined us for our first pilot. She hung back intentionally from the rest of her group so that she could share, and I'm pretty close to quoting this, "I could cry. Our guys are leaving here with so much more confidence in how they handle and stun livestock. This was amazing." And I think that goes to speak for the type of culture and the type of experience that we're developing. We're developing a program where people come in, we're dealing with a sensitive topic, and we try our very best to make sure that they have a fun experience that's meaningful, and that they leave with the tools that they need to go back and make a very positive difference in their plants right away. Because that doesn't just impact the welfare of the animals and the ability to comply with the law, but it impacts the mental and physical well-being of the people that are doing that work. It should help them to hang around for a whole lot longer. So that gives you a bit of a rundown of where we came from, the stuff that we're working on. I shared a little bit about our hands-on training. And so at this point, I'm going to pass things off to Ashlynn. Ashlynn Kirk's our program manager for the Humane Handling Institute.
Hello.
So she can fill you in on our Humane Handling Program Development workshop.
Thank you. So a robust systematic approach is really scary and daunting when you think about that word. But essentially, it is a written humane handling program that is comprised of procedures and records. So what we do is we take a step back and think of each step in your process from the time that the animal arrives at your facility to the time that it is bled out. And we take a look at each of those steps in the process and determine if there's any potential for pain, discomfort, or accidental injury. And then we put procedures in place to mitigate that risk, and we keep a record over time. So why is a written plan important? This is simple, because it is proof that you are doing what you set out to do. So overall, our goal with the humane handling program is to either prevent a pattern of bad things from forming or break a pattern that exists already. So the difference between a systematic approach and a robust systematic approach, essentially, you do your initial assessment of those things that may cause pain, discomfort, or accidental injury to animals. You do this assessment of handling and slaughter practices in both cases. You design your facility and implement handling practices. And then you do a periodic evaluation of your facilities just to make sure that those risks aren't happening in your handling practices. And then you modify the facilities or handling as needed. So what makes a robust systematic approach different is that you have those written procedures, so everyone's all on the same page. You have written records to keep a history, and you also have an FSIS review. So with that, let's talk. We're here to help you troubleshoot, and this may not be a comfortable thing for you, but this is a safe place to do it, just like David mentioned earlier. And we've also included our email here if you have any questions after this question and answer session.
All right, so that's what we've got to kick things off. I think at this point, we can take some questions and get into more troubleshooting.
Can we just go?
Yeah, Mark, if you're able to, just for anybody's reference, down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a reactions button, and then you can raise your hand. That way, if anybody has any questions, we can kind of call on you one by one. But feel free, since yeah, go ahead and kick us off, Mark.
All right. My name is Mark Broccoli. I'm with Open Range Beef. We have two mid-size harvest facilities. Do you have resources that could guide us through ritual slaughter like halal? Do you have like a team that could support that level of process?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Mark. So that's something that I've got the capacity to do just through prior consulting experience. But we don't have that like part of our team developed at this point. So I'm happy to answer questions for you if you do have questions on that.
I don't know if it's a question more, we're starting to harvest goats and we have a calf restraint system. One with Temple Grandin that has the belly on it. So that's one way to do the goats. It creates a little bit of risk to the individual that's doing the cut. So the other option is hanging the goat. And then it would be, can we stabilize the goat to ensure that we do the one cut to meet or exceed everything that we're talking about? So some of it is, do you guys have a resource that we would pay or reach out to visit the plant to actually say, here's how we currently do it? Do you have advice?
Yeah, that's something we can work on with you. Just reach out by email and we can get into more detail on it. One thing I can mention to you, so I've worked around halal slaughter in veal establishments, and stunning might be an option for you if you do like non-penetrating captive bolt, or if we can set up electrical. If it's a potentially reversible form, you can often use that with halal, and that's one thing I would recommend, because it does make handling much more controllable. And then the other piece that it adds as well is less risk of the animal experiencing a major stress response during that slaughter process that could cause them to take a long time to lose consciousness. So it helps to mitigate some risk if we can put a stunning step in.
Okay, thank you.
And Ashlynn and Dr. Kirk, would you mind putting whatever your best contact email is into the chat, just in case anybody wants to reach out with questions?
Yeah, you got
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Great.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
David, I have a few more if I could go, unless you want somebody else to go.
Yeah, go ahead and stay on that track.
So if things do go sideways, are we, like, do you offer a service that says, here's how we recommend you not necessarily respond to USDA, but we just want to ensure the corrective actions, preventive measures that we're putting in place, more than us and USDA are confident in? Is that a service you guys provide as well?
Yeah, that's something we can definitely do.
And just speaking from experience, the Humane Handling Institute is working with a plant that I work with to help with something very similar to that, and they've been a great resource.
More of a comment, I think, is, so we had Temple Grandin in our facility just to give us some guidance, and she helped some facilities that I've worked with for years, and I realized she's more of an animal behavioralist than a humane handling type of. So that's why we're kind of looking for someone else that could really come in and say, the floors that we have, are they really acceptable? So we have one of our facilities in Gordon, and we use the rubber tires that are interlocked. And, we have a lot of JBS alumni that work with us. So, I work with JBS, so we have some knowledge of history, but we're still looking for someone to come in and say, while that's okay, you know what, check this method out. Mm-hmm. So you offer that type of service too?
Yeah, so at this point, we've been doing a lot of that work actually in conjunction with Denise Parody with Single Shot Consulting. So Denise is here in this group right now. So we can share a lot of our resources through Denise at this point. So if you reach out, I'm pretty sure that's something we'd be able to get worked out.
And Mark, this is Denise. I've met you before when I formerly worked at Lawrence Meats and you visited us. So you and I know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So you guys do on-site training, right? That's what I hear, along with this type of training, web training.
Yeah, we can set that up. Our primary focus right now, though, Mark, is actually in getting people in our shop hands-on, so that we can train them in a more controlled environment, because we don't have USDA watching over our shoulder when we do that training. So that takes all the pressure off the trainee, and we can really focus on coaching.
And do you align yourselves? So you're with the school specifically?
That's correct. Yep.
So do you align yourselves with other schools like that are in New York, Pennsylvania, so we don't have to put a team on a plane?
That's something we haven't set up quite yet, but I think a network like that would be something useful.
And one thing that, when the time comes that Humane Handling Institute is able to, take out of state students, and I'm not sure if you guys are there yet or not. That's one question I have today. So I consult with small plants as well, especially when they have suspensions or holds on their slaughter. And I work with them to do their corrective and preventive actions. And what I'm kind of looking at is maybe sending someone who can be trained in more of a train the trainer sense, as opposed to sending the entire team. So, Michael Rossi is someone that I know as well. And he said that he felt very confident after attending this program that he could go back and train his staff. And then you've got that one person or two people who are kind of that champion on the floor, which is a lot more cost effective than sending your whole kill floor.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
great.
So one thing we're working on here is we're searching for grant opportunities to be able to expand nationally and offer free tuition. So that's the thing that's been great for processors here in Wisconsin, is that through the initial grant, we've got enrollment space for 240 Wisconsin-based processors to come in and take those two courses we talked about free of charge. So we've got seats available for folks that are out of state. So we can certainly welcome people. If that's something people are interested in, you just got to reach out.
Okay, I'm going to just pop over and take a couple of questions from the chat, and then we'll be back. Let's see. First one's from Nelson. Has anyone from USDA or Wisconsin State Inspection attended your course?
Good question, Nelson. So we haven't had attendees from either of those yet, but we've worked closely with folks from both FSIS and from the state of Wisconsin as we're developing our programming.
Okay. Yeah, good question. I was curious about that too. Next question comes from Tylee. What's the best way to restrain a beef head while it's in the head catch?
Ooh, gotcha. Do you want that, or should I do that one?
I can talk about it.
Go for
So what we've been talking about lately is when you have your beef cattle head in, I don't know if you can still see the screen.
Nope. You can
No,
feel free to
gotcha.
reshare.
Yeah, just go ahead and share. Yeah, and
This one.
yeah, it depends on the chute they've got, but
Yeah, it depends on the chute. But when you have the beef cow head in the neck restraint, we really stress that it's really important to restrain them further instead of having them move their head all around and you having to wait for the perfect shot. On our chute, there's a capability that you can put a neck bar on. So it essentially takes a bar and it goes under the neck and it pushes the beef head over. So it just stabilizes it a little more. And then in our meat plant, we have one that brings the chin up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, just to add a little bit more to that. So, that question was from Ty Lee, right?
Yep.
Okay, can we hear Ty Lee?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Can you describe your shoot, Ty Lee, so we can help to, I guess, help to tailor the answer more to your needs?
Sure. Yeah, we just have a head catch, and we were just doing exactly what you had said before, Ashlyn. Just kind of waiting for the beef to hold still and make a good shot.
Mhm.
And we've been looking at a couple options, and the first thing that I tried was the nose bar, and that was a little scary because the chain broke and it almost hit the person that was stunning. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I just kind of wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were. I've seen the chin bar and the neck bar. Does that make for a hard angle when you are stunning? Because we use a 10 millimeter on the older cattle, and then the 22 mag on under 30 beef.
Gotcha. So you're using firearm.
Yes.
Okay. I would assume that it wouldn't be too bad necessarily with firearm too, but you can see in the picture in the slide,
I
well,
just put it off.
in the slide that we were sharing. So the nice thing about using that head sweep is that it pulls that head off to the side, and then the stunner operator can actually kind of reach around the corner to place the
Okay.
shot. So that worked really nice. And one of the exercises we do in our workshop is we have our attendees try both ways. So that's an unloaded captive bolt gun that guy's using in that exercise. And we let them experience what's that feel like to try to get that gun in the right spot.
Mm,
They can freely move their head versus if we just do the simple sweep, which doesn't completely restrain their head. And I would argue that's not necessary because too much head restraint will make them fight it. But it's got to be just
Okay.
enough to keep the head in a more predictable space.
yeah.
So coming back to firearm, the big thing to watch for there is going to be that you've got enough elevation if you're using the firearm so that you're able to shoot down
Okay.
that head. Because if you're standing at ground level, the issue you run into is you may not get the right perpendicular angle at the front of the head to knock out the thalamus, which is kind of like the heart of the brain and the center that's associated with consciousness.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what we noticed with the nose bar. It was you actually had to kind of bend down a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I saw that you guys commented about the registration link. So how much does it cost for someone to go to the training
So
if I'm from Wyoming?
the workshops we offer $1,000 for a 2-day workshop.
$1,000
Yep.
for a 1-day workshop? Is that what you said?
2.
Oh, 2 day. Okay.
The 2-day workshop. So the one that would, well, I mean, depending on if you have a robust systematic approach to animal welfare, if you don't, then both of those workshops that we have online now would be applicable to you. But if you have a humane handling program that's in place already, then the effective restraint and stunning workshop would be the best fit.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, we've got the robust plan, so. Restrain. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Dr. Kurt, actually, I don't know if you've had experience with these, but I've had I've had a couple of different experiences with some chin lifts that were really, really helpful in high-risk plants. And one of them was made by Salt Creek Industries out in Klamath, Oregon. It's called the Mugger, and it can be retrofitted onto just about any squeeze chute. And then there's another one that I've used by Aeroquip called the Q Catch.
I've seen that one, yeah.
And it's I'm not sure if they have a power actuated or hydraulic one, but I know they do have a manual one, and those chin lifts can be a good alternative, maybe another option for someone as a retrofitted front mount additional head restraint that really makes it so the animal cannot move their head.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other brands in mind just specifically for the group if they wanted to look something up, or do you recommend something custom fabricated?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I end up recommending ends up being custom fabricated. And in a lot of cases, that's it's better from a price perspective too. that if you come up with what you want, you know, a lot of these local welding shops can make it for much more affordable than if you buy it commercially. So that's something to keep in mind. Like a good welder and fabricator could come in and take a look at what you've got for restraint. And a lot of these folks are so creative, they can dream up what you need. So there's that. The head catch that we're using for some of our training is built by Foremost. And so that head sweep bar that we have on there is manually actuated, which is useful for some plants, for the small, real small processors. And that was a fairly affordable system. I think we had around $750 in it, just used for teaching purposes.
That's very affordable for what it does for you.
Oh yeah, I mean that's another important thing to keep in mind. You know, these adding something like head restraint may seem like an optional thing until you face a shutdown. You know, like once you face an inspection, then you realize that that thing paid for itself just from one day of stop production, right? And so I would say for anybody, if you're slaughtering cattle, head restraint is not a nice to have. Head restraint is really a must have.
Yeah, one day of down production and the profits from that, as well as how many producers will immediately find another plant if they can, you know, when you start to stack up Humane Handling and ours, that can really be a lasting impact. I'm working with a couple plants right now that have lost a lot of customers because of that, and simply they're just not equipped, you know. Mm-hmm. Denise.
Sorry, took me a minute. So just to accentuate the value of being a participant on the on-site, because I watched I was able to watch some of the on-site handling workshop. They cut heads, not live heads, but they cut animal heads in half. And so you can actually visualize where that brain lies. So to Tylee's, point, like it helps you visualize much better in those tricky situations when the head position changes, where that brain lies and what you're aiming for. And it's such a huge value and something that, I couldn't go on site and do. So I found the workshop valuable, and I've been in this quite a bit. And so there are visuals that they have put together that are absolutely amazing. And Kurt, I don't know why you don't have your favorite head behind you today, but
oh yeah. That's because he's over in the other building.
Getting ready for class.
Yeah.
The visuals of the real animal heads and then the model heads, and they actually have brains that you get to do it as live without the risk as I've ever seen, and it's pretty awesome.
We should show them that picture quick. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Denise.
Thank you.
I think if you bring that slide back up, we could show them this one. We can talk about the pig head. Okay.
There we are.
So yeah, if you all can see that slide again, the slide that is in the upper left shows one of our model heads that we use for training. So when we train people to stun, we'll actually fire our captive bolt stunners into these specially made model heads. This is an example of a pig head. I think this was a market pig, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. But we've got several different types of livestock available. So we've got like a dairy cow. That's the one that Denise was talking about. So our dairy cow model is like strikingly realistic. We've also got a beef cow head. We've got a market steer that we use for training. Then we've got a market pig, a sow, and we also have a sheep. And the cool thing about these heads is they have these brain canisters that we can put in where you take Play-Doh, you shape it in the shape of a brain. It's in this mold, place it inside the head. People can shoot into that head, and then you can take that brain out and show exactly where the bolt went in the clay. We take it a step further then, because we take cadaver heads, so formerly live heads. We section those on our bandsaw, and we go through an anatomy session before we start shooting heads. And then we can take those clay brains and we can lay them like right in the cranium, like right in the brain cavity, so people can see exactly where their bolt would have went. So it really helps to tie all the pieces together so that when you stun, you're not just looking at the outside of the animal and hoping that you hit the right spot. You know exactly where the right spot is, and it becomes very easy to visualize then.
That's incredible. I would have given anything for that training when I had started, you know, and it really beats the heck out of taking practice shots on an already cadaver head and then splitting it on the bandsaw after hours at the plant and then using a Bic pen to try to figure out flight paths, you know, and it's just this is something I definitely wish I would have had early in my stunning years. Davita's got a great question, but we're going to wait a couple of minutes until they're back. And let's get to Nelson's other question. What's the latest in technology and developments for stunning? Increased adoption of CO2 stunning is the last big thing I can recall, he says.
Yeah, okay. So let's see. I think on a larger scale, I think with captive bolt stunning, especially with pneumatics, we've seen the introduction of a newer, larger captive bolt stunner, pneumatic captive bolt stunner for larger plants. That's the Jarvis USSS 21. It's been out for a few years, but that's a very well-built stunner. It does a nice job on heavy bulls, but it's applicable really across cattle in general. So for large plants, I'd say that's a nice advancement. In the case of small and very small plants, another stunner that's really great for captive bolt is, again, it's the Jarvis Super Heavy Duty. I think that's, I think the model number on that is like 4144059, but it takes a 6-grain cartridge. So those are the red colored cartridges instead of the typical black 4-grain cartridge. And we've got a lot of processors in this part of the country that are switching to using those guns just because they provide so much more power and so much more effective stunning. So I'd say those are some advancements. Another thing to mention too is research in the stunning space has really been growing quite a bit. We've got multiple USDA funded studies that we've been running here on site, and that's been led by a graduate student that co-ops between our Humane Handling Institute and Animal Welfare Lab and University of Nebraska named Carly Anderson. And she's doing a lot of really cool stuff with understanding tissue profiles that we've got to try to stun through to get animals effectively stunned. So that's some of how I think things are advancing. On the electrical stunning side, we're seeing more and more uptake of amperage regulated stunners instead of the older step up transformers. So that's been a nice advancement as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit of it, Nelson. That was a good question.
I've got a direct question here. When it comes to pistol grip or the inline configurations for captive bolt stunning, do you have a recommendation of one or the other, or is it personal preference?
I have a very strong recommendation. Let me see if I can find some props in my cabinet behind me so we can talk about that.
Great.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got a gun here.
We love a prop.
What have I got? I sent them.
Training space.
I sent them all over the other building. Let me think here for a second. I might have one. Let me look. Nope. Okay, no problem. We can make this work. I've got a part of one gun that will help us a little bit. Okay. I just got to quickly take some things apart and then I'll show you kind of the basics of how these things work. Okay. So, let's see here.
I'm gonna
see if we can see
make you guys
ourselves.
a little bigger, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to stand up here so that I can get up close to the camera. All right, so this is a bolt out of a pistol grip stunner with a non-penetrating head. All right, so it's not exactly the same thing as a penetrating bolt, but the concept here is the same. In those pistol grip stunners, they have a series of buffers that are stacked down the entire length of the bolt. So when you fire that stunner, then a lot of the force that comes from that detonated cartridge gets picked up by these buffers as they compress, as the bolt moves down the barrel. That does two things. One, it reduces the amount of power that's then placed into the animal's head. That's a problem. And the second piece is it slows the bolt down. There's a third piece to this actually as well. When these buffers compress, they reach a point where they can no longer be compressed any further, regardless of how big of a cartridge you put in that gun. And so you're actually really limited on the amount of travel distance you have with these bolts. At best, you can get about 3 inches of bolt travel out of one of those pistol grip stunners. And that's if you're using like the long bolt. That's a problem because the thalamus in a lot of these livestock is much deeper than 3 inches. So that's for the pistol grip self-retracting stunners. The other thing to note is that there are canister type stunners, you know, the longer ones, that also have that self-retracting feature. That's not a good feature to use.
Charlie's here. She was watching.
One of our lab members was actually watching, so she ran and grabbed us the gun. Your timing is phenomenal. Thank you so much. Actually, come on in. Yeah, come on in and hang out. You should say hi to everybody because we just mentioned you. Hey, so yeah, this is Carly Anderson. This is a student that's working on that stunning work. So she was watching and she grabbed the model that we needed. Okay, so you just saw the self-retracting model, right? With all those buffers laid out. Here's what the inside of the canister type stunners look like. You see how you have 3 buffers there? So you've got 2 blacks and a red, right? So the way that this system works is that this bolt is going to pass down the barrel, down this barrel right here, right? And it's going to actually fly freely. I'm going to try to push this through. So it's going to fly like that down the barrel with limited restriction until it hits the buffers at the end. So those buffers at the end just catch the bolt so it doesn't slam into the end of the barrel. That transmits just about all the power we can possibly get out of that cartridge directly into the animal's head, which is the objective if we want to effectively stun. So I just went into a pile of detail on that because this is super important. If you have a pistol grip stunner, consider replacing that with a free flight type of system, right? So there'll be the long cylindrical type of stunner that looks like this one. I'm going to reassemble this one quick. There are multiple brands that are available, but these are more effective than the pistol grip. Thank you, Ashlynn.
That's really helpful, Dr. Kirk. I had no idea. You just said some things there that make a lot of sense, but I had not considered it in the past. I mean, personally speaking, I know that when an animal is somewhat fractious or I have a difficult time with an animal that is not completely restrained, the pistol grip is really hard to consistently keep that perpendicular angle, but the free flight is much easier to follow an animal's head with it. In different situations, but the actual technical differences between those two things, I had no idea. That's a true gem of information right there.
So it's super important though to keep in mind that if the gun looks like this one, that does not mean that you actually have a 3 buffer system, because there are some of these guns available that have the self-retracting feature. That sounds like a great extra feature to have. And it's not. You do not want that. You need to manually reset these guns. That brings me to one more thing, actually. While we're talking about these, I got to spin this all the way apart to demo it. Okay, so this will work for sake of representation. So one thing that folks will do sometimes with these guns is when after they've stunned, the bolt will be sticking out. This is normal. This is completely normal. And they'll take the trigger end and they'll whack the end of the bolt and send the bolt back into the gun. That dulls the edge on this bolt. You should never, ever, ever do that. Bring that up here a little more. So if I take and I just go bing like that, it'll send it back in. And it may look cool and stuff, but not a good thing. You can tell when these guns have had that happen because they'll have little moon-shaped strike marks all over the side of the trigger. And so that's like a clue that might be happening. Instead, the way you reset these is you see this round dome on the end here of the firing pin, right here. Put that right inside the end of the bolt. It's round like that for that reason, so it fits there. And then use that to push this all the way back in to reset it every time. And then while we're talking about these tools, if you ever have to hand them to somebody, keep them broke, hand them in 2 pieces. Never, ever, ever hand one of these in 1 piece, because then somebody doesn't know if they're loaded or not.
Just like gun safety, right? What we all learned in our first gun safety courses. Let's see. Davida just got back from the slaughter floor, and so I've got a question here. It is: do you have guidance on drafting a humane handling plan for mobile units where animal handling infrastructure is constantly changing? This is a topic very near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of this work, and it is very challenging when every day when you show up to a different farm, the situation is different.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can tell you we don't have that specially built right now, but I'm pretty sure that by the end of November, we're going to have something. Right, David?
I do I do believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. And one thing, and this is probably best for a processor and producer relationship building NPAN Live, but one thing that I would say is that when I manage the USDA inspected mobile slaughter unit and other, and I've also worked with other ones, most of them were co-ops, and I would say that you can do a lot to train your staff to anticipate different outcomes in your robust systematic approach. You can give them decision-making scenario trees, right? Like if this happens, what do I do? But I would also invite you to think about product specs, right? When I work for, when I've managed a value-added facility and I've got to make hot dogs or I've got to make salami, the incoming raw material that I'm going to process in that plant needs to be the same every single time, or else it affects the finished product. And slaughter floors are no different, or mobile slaughter is no different. You may, and this isn't as easy as it is just to say it, but finding ways to build a minimum requirement when it comes to animal handling facilities, even if it's a bare minimum, can go miles for you when it comes to your humane handling and mobile slaughter situations. So I know that's not really what you're asking, but at least starting to think about how to have that conversation is extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to follow up any of that, please jump in. Mark, did we get to all your questions? Great. I've got one. Yeah. Thanks for asking them. I've got one more direct question here. Do you recommend captive bolt or electrical stunning for market hogs and small plants?
Yeah, my preference is electrical. In general, I find that to be more manageable on the shackling side of it. But you've got to be set up right. So head-only electrical has a pretty good chance of return to consciousness issues and getting somebody in a whole lot of trouble. So if you're going to do electrical stunning on market hogs and small plants, you need to do a 2-step stun, where first you stun the head, and then you apply the same stunning wand to sort of like the armpit of the animal, so the space right behind their front leg. And that'll help to fibrillate the heart. So it'll get the heart into a state where it's not beating in a rhythmic motion. That drops blood pressure to virtually 0. And then that's like your insurance step that the animal is not going to return to consciousness. So that's my general suggestion. Now, the next thing about captive bolt for market hogs is that captive bolt for market hogs is definitely effective. it works. It works really well. But the downside to it is that you'll see some meat quality effects there as well. So you'll tend to see a little more blood spotting or blood splash because of all the involuntary kicking that happens and the change in blood pressure in the capillaries and the muscles. And then again, you've got that challenge of shackling and keeping your shackler safe.
I once worked with a plant that had quite a few issues with returns to consciousness on the rail, and they would do an electrical stun and then a captive bolt and then a brain pith, and it was a very long process, right? But my question is, they did a double head stun, and I was always curious: is there any point to that additional head stun? Does it get you more bang for your buck, or does it increase the chances of the animal like shocking them back into consciousness? Is there any point to a double head stun?
Is this a double mechanical head stun like Captain Bolt got?
This would be a double electrical and then a single heart. So head, heart. I think they were just throwing spaghetti against the wall and doing everything that they possibly could to keep their grant of inspection at this point. So,
Yeah.
I'm just curious
So-
if you'd ever heard of that.
Yeah, so I've heard of processors doing something similar with captive bolt, where they would do head only captive or head only electrical, then heart electrical, and then a captive bolt shot. And I think if I were advising somebody, I would probably advise them to take that approach instead of going back to the electrical again. Just from a worker safety standpoint and ergonomic standpoint, it gets really tough to get that lawn place to do that second head stun if you're going to do that. And then on top of that, that can create some safety issues. So I wouldn't be doing that necessarily. And one other thing, you should always keep your backup stunner available if you're doing if you're doing any stunning, but especially with electrical stunning for like pigs. Keep a backup stunner nearby. That should be your captive bolt. And the reason for that is you never want to see somebody grab an electrical stunner and place that on a pig that's, say, hanging during bleed out or something like that, because you don't know where that electricity is heading. It could find another path to ground.
Wow.
So you should always, always, always rely on mechanical as your backup stun.
That's a great point. Okay, I know we're over time. If anybody has any other questions, please throw them in the Q&A box. I've got to ask one question that I get all the time from people, and it is, does my hog knockbox need to be fully insulated on the inside with rubber mats or something? And do I need to wear thick rubber gloves when handling the electrical stunner? What is the danger of electrocution with these tools?
Well, I can't give you any statistics on that. I would say in general, don't play with fire. So, right? So you want to do everything you possibly can to prevent some sort of ground fault in that system when you go ahead and place your stun, right? So lining the inside of the restrainer, that's a fantastic idea with plastic or rubber. Wearing rubber-soled boots, that's like a requirement. Wearing gloves, that's also a great idea. I do that when I'm on our own slaughter floor here. Like I wear rubber gloves. And usually I've got an insulating layer, like I wear a cotton underneath the rubber too, just keep my hands drier. And those are all good steps that you should take.
Great, that's really helpful. Okay, let's see. I think that's all we've got for questions for today. If anybody has any last ones, please pop them in. But other than that, thank you. This has been awesome. There's so much. It's nebulous, right? And it's like really not super clear what best practices are in these situations. And the fact that there's so many people out there, when you ask them, they want to give vague answers because they themselves aren't sure or don't want to be liable. And I just really appreciate that you and your team are willing to give direct answers.
Oh yeah, that's our pleasure. We feel like that's the thing that we can do to help people, right? And to help a lot of animals too, because I've got kind of a closing point I want to share with everybody. So we work in a space where we're shuttling these animals from live to dead. And a really important thing, I think, to keep in your mind, this is something we share with our workshop attendees, and it seems to be empowering to them, is that just because an animal is coming to your plant to die does not mean that animal should suffer in that process at all. So it is totally possible, and in fact, I would say it's a requirement if you want to continue to operate in this space in the long term, to make sure that you are doing the very best to make sure those animals do not experience pain and distress and suffering during those final moments of their life, because for some animals, that may be relief from a life that was not so awesome. For small and very small plants, we see that kind of stuff. So you have an important role to play for a lot of animals, and you're feeding a whole lot of people too. It's a place you should take a lot of pride in.
Agreed. Okay, we just got a couple, let's see. Yeah, great. A couple of comments. Thank you so much, everybody. Dr. Kirk, Ashlynn, I think you guys placed your contact info in the chat box. Looks like it's hhi@uwrf.edu. At the very top of the chat box, before we close it out, if anybody wants to click on the links, we've got the website to the Humane Handling Institute up there. We've also got the NPAN listserv and Google group. Please feel free. And then we've also got another link right there, right at the bottom. So thanks, everybody. This has been fantastic. I can't wait for us to do a follow-up on this after the Institute's been going for a year or so or more, and hear how it's been going and get some firsthand accounts from some of the students. So good luck, everybody. I hope that everybody's slaughter compliance stays nice and comfortable and has no issues, and may we all have great weeks at our plants. And